West of What is a round-table conversation inspired by Mother Earth's call for more landwork ceremonies to happen. This is a podcast where spirituality lands into politics, history, culture, and more because land is where we all meet. We want to know how we can come into greater connection with the land and each other, and how we can all move forward with integrity. We believe the answers and solutions will come from many voices, from the truths that happen inside of our togetherness. Hello, and welcome to West of What. And I'm slightly in heart awe about our guest today, because Tracey Ash is possibly one of the most powerful and magical people I have ever met. And her relationship with land is one of the most intelligent that I have ever seen in anybody. And so I am deeply excited and very honored that she has come on to West of What to talk to us. And the intention for this episode is that it initiates you into something more meaningful and real than you have known before. Tracey, thank you so much for coming on to West of What.
Thank you. I really appreciate that introduction.
It's rare for me to have a conversation where so many times the person speaking, everything they say, I am just like, yes, 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 I really resonate and I really agree. And whilst West of What is not that, actually, West of What is a roundtable conversation, and there's many guests on here that I don't always agree with. I'm so excited to see where this conversation goes, because I just think the knowledge that you have of land is what I call wisdom, which is knowledge that has been lived, not learned. Would you agree?
Very much. The work that I do with the land is work with memory, and it's work with complete memory, and the intention is memory. The intention is the memory of the archives of our planet and the archives of humanity through timelines, through time, through eternity. And one of my massive passions is how archives can be transferred through time, magnetized through time, materialized through time, and what architecture of time and reality can be created when we become more alive in our memory and more alive in our quantum field capabilities. So, yes, my work is about land and ancient gateways. It's also intrinsically linked to soul and incarnation and our archival memories as spiritual and divine humans incarnating on a planet that is reminding us to remember. And the other part of it is how do we remember, and what that entails in terms of our own valid and bona fide, authentic journey on the planet, and what it looks like in terms of the sequence of our incarnation, and of course our mission on the planet, and potentially the signature and nature of many missions and many incarnations on the planet. And the other part is memory, and how many times have we failed, and how many times have we succeeded, and what can we draw upon in terms of archives, and what can the land give us in terms of memory and spiritual strength and spiritual power to succeed in terms of our mission on the planet. So I'm extremely interested in the concept of immortal memory. I'm extremely interested in how that sits with us as mortals, how we understand even the context of psychology and how we frame it and how we understand it, and how we equally at the same time frame our intelligence in terms of how we understand why we are here. So I live in Egypt because what fascinates me is timing, and Egypt is an architecture of archives and time. And it's
maybe the greatest I've ever seen, actually. I don't feel like anywhere I've been in the world has got more records of time than Egypt. Would you agree?
yeah, like, because that has been my pivotal research here.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of what is here, there's very little indent on understanding it in terms of academic archives.
Mm-hmm.
Very little indent into it in terms of mainstream spirituality or more of a colonial psychology. So the archives of time, I've just got back from the Valley of the Kings, and we were exploring the archives and what is here in the Valley of the Kings. And so the archives are impeccable records of a human's history, but they're also impeccable archival records of the journey of the soul. And even to just give you some idea about the immortality and the eternity of what is indeed recorded here, is their science on time and their science on timing, their science on incarnation is such that an eternity of evolution through bloodlines, through genetics and soul families can always animate across incarnational cycles. And the ancient Egyptians are stunning in terms of their understanding of not only timelines, but cycles of time and psychology trends and psychology destructions, manipulations, and controls that are showing up today. So ancient Egypt, in terms of the land and the archives, the ancient monuments and the architecture. The archives are intrinsic in understanding who we are, and the archives are immensely relevant in terms of understanding who we are as a species disconnected from the planet and disconnected from universal interaction. So the ancient Egyptians, in their archives, in their ceremonies, in their rituals, understand how to weave gateways, portals, stargates, and they understand the placement of the architecture of time in third dimensional reality. And I believe that's really what the true purpose of the pyramids field is to anchor and animate an architecture of time that is relevant to humans who will always seek to remember. So this is a pretty relevant conversation for humans, mortals at this time, who have memory, who have dreams, who have incarnated with memory of another architecture of time, another architecture of reality, another architecture of psychology. And at the very root of these archives in ancient Egypt are stunning clues in terms of returning to complete consciousness and complete memory.
And I'd like to ask you about that actually, because I understand the importance. I have had experience with memory that has been incredibly revealing, illuminating, alchemical, infusing, and important in my spiritual journey. But I have also seen what maybe could be called a misuse of there's a lot in modern spirituality where the ego, I don't know if it's making up memory or it's tapping into collective memory and it's not being used in the right way. I mean, my guides talk a lot about how there is collective memory. There's many people that remember a lifetime of Jesus because we also have a collective memory bank. But I don't see that much healthy inner work. I see a lot of ego being activated and ungrounded and disconnection from who you are now. And I know that's not the work that you do. And I feel like you might have some really sound things to say about this.
It's a extremely complex issue to solve. So yes, I'll explore some ideas around this and animating fantasy and why the mainstream is in trouble is if we are initiated in a legacy of fantasy and in a legacy of wounding, then the transfer of the timeline is problematic. And animating fantasy is what humans do best in order to avoid the essential internal work And this part is really important because, of course, our archives are incredibly important. But remember that when we make the entry into any kind of spiritual work, even though we may have some memory, we also must have the humility to recognize that we are students, and that it is useful imitating, and it's useful learning and consuming in third dimensional ways. For example, it's useful listening to this podcast, but it's not useful replicating my wisdom as your own if you haven't moved through the essential sequences. And this is what we essentially see on an entity like Gaia TV. This is what we essentially see in a lot of misinformation on Egypt, particularly ancient alien theorists, because part of what we're seeing in mainstream has a very deep and unfortunate colonial foundation. And where we have colonial foundations that haven't been deeply transformed, then our journey is incomplete. And that again is part of our collective movement through memory and also psychological programming, frequency density, etc., etc. So again, yes, we're all entangled. We're all responsible. And we are, even if we believe we are spiritual, we are all entangled. And that's something that is something to solve when we are in movement on a day-to-day basis. And that also then brings us into the implications of accessing nature, accessing the elements profoundly, why ancient gateways exist. And I mean, in the mainstream, is very problematic because knowledge on gateways can be extremely, extremely egoistic. And so there can be the seeking out of power spots, power sites, you know, all the classics like Stonehenge, the Great Pyramids, etc. But that isn't spiritual tourism. And it should never be engaged with as spiritual tourism, although people may seek out a reboot or a regeneration and want the wow factor, but it's not the wow factor. And I think the mainstream has really cultivated the ego and needing to wow, whereas very deep spiritual work, it is,
I mean, it
much more eternal. Yeah.
It has awe, not wow. Like that's what I would say is like when you are actually pilgrimaging and going through gateways, you are brought to your knees in awe. It isn't a quick wow factor. It is awe. And that takes time, and it's painful, and it's process. And my experience is if you work with any kind of gate, you're going to be working with way before you're actually at that gate. Because actually to open a, maybe I'm wrong, but for me, the keys to any gate are relationship. And so if you are not in relationship with land spirits, memory. If you're not in proper relationship, you don't have the keys to open these gates.
Exactly. I've just been to the Valley of the Kings. This all relates.
Mm-hmm.
So I have just visited one of the primary tombs in the Valley of the Kings, which has the most extensive archive of the Book of Gates. Now, what I understand is that there is and should be sanctified and legitimate calling to gateways. And really, the protocol is invitation.
Mm-hmm.
And
100%.
yeah.
100%. I'm sorry, but if you're working with land that hasn't invited you, would you go into somebody's house if they hadn't invited you in?
So it takes time. And I think because I live here and I am aware of the timeline of Instagram and mainstream spirituality, there's far less of a focus on listening and far greater attachment on projection and achieving that Instagram shot or projecting a spiritual practice that doesn't belong to the legacy of what is ancient Egypt. Now, I'll just briefly go through it so your listeners can understand why ancient Egypt is so extreme in its archival knowledge. So, what we have here are natural stargates that have then been enhanced and built into to create an even more robust architecture of reality, ritual, ceremony, and time. And I also believe that the robust architecture, for example, of the pyramids field is a solution for Atlantis. Because, of course, ancient Egypt is built into the archives of a previous advanced civilization that is speaking across time to the ancient Egyptians and continues to speak over time if we are correct in our own sequences of being called and initiated and listening, which is the most critical of spiritual qualities and technologies that we can humanly endeavor to practice. Now, we can only listen if we are committed to healing. And what you've also got to remember is we can only heal if we are being initiated by individuals who can perceive your archives. So gone are the days where individuals should be attending a workshop and then generating the title of expert. I mean, what we're locking into at this time is this is a clean up operation for so many disastrous missions on the planet.
So many.
Yeah, where we haven't succeeded, and that is in memory. Now, the ancient Egyptians built ancient Egypt on that. So you have the reverberation of, for example, Atlantis and the destruction of it. Atlantis is a physical location which is it's west. It's west of the Great Pyramids, and it's an actual location. Now, this is where the archives of ancient Egypt arrive. They arrived from the West. They arrive with Osiris, and the ancient Egyptians' mythologies are highly rooted in Osiris and scattering all the parts of ourselves and then finding the magic and the alchemy to restore all the parts and all of the memory. And you need gatekeepers to recalibrate your own timelines. You need gatekeepers. And I do work with, for example, the technologies of the Great Pyramids and the Pyramids field, and I work with time inserts. And if you understand anything about time inserts, then you'll understand that, yeah, I'm a gatekeeper who has permission for that jurisdiction in terms of timelines that are not normally accessible. With
For people listening, what is a time insert?
a time insert is about being able to trace and track your archives, your current, your past, and where you have glitches, i.e., really strong difficulty, karmic difficulty in terms of breaking, repeat incarnational challenges, then I will sit your soul and levitate or animate it. And then I will track time and select time appropriate to you. So the work can never be strategy based or generic. It has to be bespoke. It has to be completely unique to the signatures of this incredible soul on the planet who is consistently incarnating to seek a solution to all these parts of oneself that are scattered across time. So it's my job always to locate the timeline and insert it to recalibrate and to weave and to repair and to initiate and activate a new cycle of incarnation on the planet. Now, this also comes into my own archives and into my memories in terms of my incarnations and my immortal incarnations as an architect of humanity and where I was in terms of the pyramids field too. So everywhere I've lived in Egypt is connected to my role as an architect and my role as an individual who is assisting humanity to solve time and to progress. So I have a particular role, and that's why I'm here. I'm here consistently. And the work that is needed at this time is so essential. And we need bona fide spiritual work, not classically mainstream and inconsistent ego-based work, because those individuals have contracted through lifetimes to be in an incarnation that is robust enough and solid enough and lived enough and understood enough that it is building an architecture of reality that cannot be manipulated. And that's a very, very strong psychology that has transcended colonial psychology. It's transcended polarities, duality, excessive patriarchy, density, whether we are men or women. in terms of patriarchy too. And
Yeah.
we are returning to something that is pure within ourselves, within our own architecture, within our own existence. And that means we must be absolute. And this is in the archives of ancient Egypt. And this is what the kings and queens were prepared to be. In secular rule, absolute, and in spiritual and divine dominion, absolute. Not one or the other. And what really then magically animates is what has been destroyed.
Why didn't ancient Egypt work then? Because it's not here.
Oh, it is here.
Okay.
It's here. And it's here throughout every civilization which has traces of a global pyramids field and a global consciousness and wisdom archive that is benevolent. So there's your unifying factor, is benevolence, non-war, love, etc., etc. So this is fundamentally what the archives of ancient Egypt are built on. So if you look at something like Djoser, which is the first pyramid of Djoser, it's located in the pyramids field in Saqqara. What strikes me immediately in the architecture of the pyramid of Djoser, for example, are the chapels of Hathor. And the chapels of Hathor are subterranean chapels. Where is the goddess? So the goddess is fixed as an archive. And the goddess is an archive of time. How do I work with time inserts? I am initiated in the cult of the goddesses here. But this is no ordinary and mainstream goddess cult. And I'm very careful about the traditions that I follow. So why does Egypt not work? Because, of course, Cleopatra is extremely challenging as regards to her role in the destruction of Egypt. And yet in the mainstream, she is celebrated as a traditional queen. She would have foresaw the destruction of Egypt. And if she was indeed a profound and traditional queen and high priestess, the archives that would have animated with her would have corrected her human error. Got it?
Yes.
So we're animating not just archives and not just significant thoughts, we're animating significant structures. The Book of Gates is an extraordinary archive, and the Book of Gates is not negotiated without any liaison with the gatekeepers. And the gatekeepers are absolute. And the gatekeepers are also intrinsic to perceiving your own evolutionary status, and that gives you your rites of passage. So the Book of Gates will firmly lock out what is relevant and what isn't relevant, what is truth, what is the mat, and what is not the mat. So ancient Egypt is alive. It is extremely well. However, it is only human consciousness that decommissions its architecture and archives. Because if we cannot honor its memory and we cannot perceive its memory, it will not animate and reveal, unveil its significant and extraordinary Atlantean magic. And this is, I initiate individuals to restore this, to resurrect this, to initiate is also to belong to an intrinsic level of protection. And oh my goodness, we need major protection, not from a fear based, but we need major protection at this time because of the nature of the architecture of reality that is it's being manipulated, and we must have another architecture that we can immerse ourselves in just to regenerate, just to restore our biology, our psychology, our emotional intelligence, our spiritual intelligence, our awareness. I mean, we're designed as extraordinary humans, but the nature of the design of modern world is to minimize how extraordinary we are as human beings. So that is what is here. It's alive and it is absolutely extraordinary. However, there are few individuals who are humble enough and who are trained well enough to be able to not just experience it, but to hold it. Hold it.
It's interesting that you mentioned hold it, because as you were speaking, I was seeing, it's one of the things that I've been working with all year is the shadow of the collapsed feminine. And I was suddenly like, oh, Cleopatra is the archetype of the shadow of the collapsed feminine, and this for me is one of the major shadows that we have to sort out if we are going to hold the new earth. The shadow of the collapsed feminine is really the source of so much. We can't talk about patriarchy without talking about the collapsed feminine shadow.
Yes, absolutely. And with it, I mean, go all sorts of Hollywood manipulations, particularly around Cleopatra.
I mean, Cleopatra is the example of the collapsed feminine leadership. It doesn't work. It is because really we live on a goddess planet. We live on a feminine planet. So you can't have, patriarchy is kind of against the law of this planet in many ways. But it can only exist if the collapsed feminine exists. So something to the collapse.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting conversation. I mean, lots of what we're exploring, I mean, isn't like a 90-minute conversation. I mean, it's like a whole lifetime conversation, right? Whether we are male, female, whatever, our fundamental initiation is to identify the shadow within ourselves, the wounding within ourselves. And I think that also means that even in our spiritual community, where in a time of redundant spiritual strategies and approaches, I mean, I don't do any mainstream meditation or visualization. In fact, that is not what here is about. So we're entering a period where we have to cooperate as individuals, as experts, and we have to find ways of animating new ways by completely working together. And that means the shadow or the wounding that you just described, we have to do that work so it's no longer present. And that's the only way we can work with integrity, with clarity, where the signature of our soul and our timelines is transferring. And we're not transferring the wound, trauma, the shadow. And this is a really significant conversation, because I see people who land here and they have massive experience. They can have massive experience in practices. And when they arrive here, it's level 1, because the practices are redundant. And if particularly your practices have been for entertainment or for the ego or for running from transforming the shadow and the wound, then Egypt is such a potent gateway and will unveil it. And what I find extremely important in terms of the timelines of Egypt and in terms of the dynasties, etc., one of my interests is to examine where or which timelines are significantly relevant. And I do have the ability to be able to track timelines academically and very much at the same time, not only academically, but metaphysically. I have the training to also then check something that's academic and intellectual with something that is soul and metaphysical. So the two fields are combined. I think that's what genius is, and I think we're being called to genius.
Physical ascension it's failed so many times. I mean, it is the work of miracles, it on a universal level, not just on a human level. It's really intense.
Well, I mean, Luxor is very interesting because it's known as a place of Karamat. The Grand Aman was born here in the shadow of the temple of the Motri temple of Hatshepsut. So he was born in the significant archive of the goddess. The Theban hills translate as the goddess, and in her physical forms, there are gateways within the portal, the Stargate of Waset. Incidentally, the ancient Egyptian word is Waset for Thebes or Luxor, and Waset in ancient Egyptian is the female one. So Luxor is super significant. It's also a Renaissance capital. And in that, I mean, the 18th and 19th dynasties actively developed queens who were God's wives, queens who are deified, queens who hold the eye of Ra, queens who hold the eye of protection. I mean, this is the cult of the goddess way beyond anything Cleopatra could ever achieve, and even way beyond anything that the Temple of Hathor could achieve in Denver. I mean, and that then has huge ramifications in terms of mainstream and what people seek out in Egypt too. So I'm a very unusual specialist. And when we look at the Renaissance timelines of ancient Egypt, the Renaissance timelines bring forward Renaissance kings. So Renaissance kings would be, for example, Amenhotep III, Amenhotep IV, who later becomes Akhenaten. Another Renaissance king is going to be Tutankhamun. So you have this Renaissance legacy that's being reanimated in, for example, the 18th and 19th dynasties. But what you see here is also a reanimation in sanctified land, which also then is a massive archival nod and activation, which also inserts spirit and timelines. And so many locations and gateways here in Luxor, for example, they'll have sanctified gateways which relate to old kingdom, iconic architects and kings. So ancient Egypt, even though there is some loss of memory in certain dynasties, there's always a thread, a timeline that's running through ancient Egypt, which always and constantly restores the original memory and the original archives, because every temple is built as an ark on an ark. And so, for example, you see things like the burning of the Library of Alexandria is complex, and it is challenging because, of course, in investing in that, you are significantly reducing your capability to understand that those damn archives are here. And they're here, and they're written in the text, they're written in the temples, they're written in the tombs. And these are the libraries. And these libraries are the evidence of something so much more spectacular in terms of incarnational possibilities. And I mean, I am speaking about this, but this is the history of Egypt. And this is the history that the academics, the Egyptologists, they can't mention it. They don't know where to start because it's mythical and magical, but it also brings in archives. And these are written archives on, for example, incarnation, immortality, eternity. So it's here.
Miracles, basically.
Yeah. And I mean, karamat is an Arabic word. And of course, in the Sufi traditions, which have very deep connection to the ancient Egyptian, karamat is a Sufi who can indeed materialize miracles, materialize time, materialize movement of oneself, i.e. by location. So, I mean, we're heading into really extreme mysticism, which is necessary. So mysticism gets talked about in the mainstream, and we've kind of lost our understanding.
We've lost mysticism.
We've lost mysticism. Yep. And we've lost the foundations of mysticism because I mean, my own legacy and history is in Western esoteric spiritualism. And so the foundations of my training is in Blavatsky, in Bailey, and Steiner, in the College of Psychic Studies, the SAGB. I mean, I'm trained as a medium first and foremost. But each of those legacies have a massive reference point, an initiation practices and processes into Egypt. So we've lost mysticism because mainstream is so heavily polluted, contaminated with this patriarchal shadow that you've just identified. And that's the transfer. And so we have all these amazing young people in spiritual community. And it makes me so cross that the transfer from some of these patriarchal attached and trauma attached individuals, influencers, and they're manipulating the timeline of individuals and who are genuinely seeking, and that there is that quality of innocence in people who remember. And I had that quality of innocence, and in terms of my journey on the planet, then light is often seen as a trophy for those individuals who are in the shadows. So those in light need to be safeguarded, they need to be protected, they need to be trained, initiated in ways where they understand what protection is. And I mean, I am a very well trained teacher. I spend my time in understanding what my service is and what individuals are seeking. And I spend my time in processes to solve this karmic cycle, which was created during the fall of Egypt. I mean, I know that
it was created during the fall. This is
yes.
why Egypt is if you want to sort out the wind, you have to go to the source of the wind. Like that's why Egypt is so challenging.
Well, if, for example, you see how the Romans engaged in ancient Egypt to destroy the goddess and to put into place, and these are documented in Roman archives and in Roman temples. And so, yeah, I research as much as I can so I can track, trace, and see where it goes wrong. And what is missing in these temples and timelines, and where the destruction was deliberate. And so, for example, there are very heavy karmic cycles set up in, for example, the temple of Esna, where even in the temple and in the rituals and the ceremony, the mat is completely removed. The goddess is changed. So Sekhmet is changed to Minute, and she then transforms as a much more minor goddess. But Sekhmet in her purest form, in her traditional form, is so Hathorian and so much the solar goddess. So these are just archival changes. And I mean, I've tracked all of these and had massive conversations with many individuals who are specialists in this field and my questions. And I think that's one of the reasons why I am here and I'm seeking so much in terms of questions and answers. We can't ask the question if we're not prepared to transform our consciousness. And so I can't ask the relevant questions unless I'm doing the work. And I think this is where we need to get to. So instead of kind of consuming Gaia TV, which does not have extraordinary teachers.
And also, I think it just, I love how much you're speaking about training, because it's amazing to me, this podcast, how it times itself. Just 2 days ago, my guides were answering a question for somebody about affirmation, essentially, and if affirmation works, which I think affirmation is highly misused. Like words are...
Me too.
Words are contracts, we have to be careful what we contract to, because when you work with shadow, you realize how a contract made hundreds of years in another lifetime is affecting you now. But what the guides were saying was that they were like, true affirmation, the gift of the command. When humans were dreamed, the divine gave us the gift. The gift of the divine was the gift of the command. But true affirmation, they were like, it has to be in integrity. If you are sitting on a sofa, and their example was, if you are sitting on a sofa eating crisps, affirming that you want to be healthy, it's not going to work. If you want the power, like the level of training you need in your energy body to do affirming magic is like your whole energy body, your whole physical body, everything has to be initiated, trained, have the muscle to hold the divine for the command to work. And this is where like these principles are just completely distorted in what you call the mainstream. It's like you can't just sit and I love that example because it was so revealing to me. I was like, of course, calling in protection only works if you're doing the work, if your energy body, like the universe is always going to meet you where you are. And this is
Well,
where I think the loss of the temples and the loss of the mystery schools and ultimately the loss of the devotional training, and it is devotional, is such a problem with the stuff that's coming on online, is we need to have the training.
I'm 100% there with you. I think one of the issues is digital culture and what imitation brings, say, to the spiritual journey, but not to spiritual initiation, which is needed for the alchemy of the subconscious. So that right away relates to how we transform our lives. It relates to how well we listen. It relates to our perception. It relates to our capability to be inspired, to imagine, to be connected with spirit, to understand our soul. I mean, these are mega spiritual qualities that can never be undervalued. And all of these are needed to change frequency. And affirmation in the shadow is extraordinarily limited and will remain extraordinarily limited. It's disastrous. When we enter into prayer, and when we enter into prayer that is in sanctified self, then we are far more capable of restoring our divine and universal connection. And again, restoring this benevolence that is extremely important to return to sustainability as spiritual beings. I mean, sustainability is a conversation. I mean, spiritual sustainability.
Yeah.
And so law of attraction, etc., has not been spiritually sustainable. It is a disaster for love. It's a disaster for a life that is peaceful and content because it's animating from a place of need and fear and stringent destruction, if you like. I mean, because nothing else matters but the ego and what the ego wants. So these pathways are not spiritual and then come with their complexities and their own challenges, especially for protection, because of course, if you eliminate the benevolence and your own benevolence, you leave yourself wide open in terms of protection. And again, it's really important that we enter safe spaces, that the teachers we choose are not online. The teachers that we choose have real experience in terms of protecting, and really understand how the subconscious animates. And often students don't really understand. They can't engage in what is being animated. So when our subconscious is animated, there's a lot happening that often we are not aware of. And so a great teacher is going to be able to, track that before it lands as a materialization. And that is actually something that is really important to understand in manifestation, and what we're really manifesting, and the lessons that we're manifesting when we are not doing the work. And again, Egypt locks that into place. They did it with the Amduat, they do it with the 12 hours of night, they do it with the solar ceremonies, which are by the hour. You see this in the Temple Valley of Khafra at the Great Pyramids. I mean, it's locked into place. It's a 24-hour ceremony, and time is kept. And our commitment to subconscious is to transform so we can remember. So our dreams, and this is really interesting. I mean, once we get to a place of restoration and resurrection, then our dreams, when we sleep, become the sequence of our living day. But I mean, that's really heavy duty metaphysics, but that is what I wake up to every single day of my life. And I love the sequences that come from dreaming. And I don't do any kind of affirmations. I pray. And I pray for world peace, and I pray for benevolence, and I definitely pray for the dismantling of old systems and old psychology that are not benevolent. And I request in my own benevolence that other benevolent beings, entities, gateways across the universe assist in that work. I want the work to be mystical. It has to be mystical, because it's only in the mystical do we transform the timeline. So this stuff is like crazy important, and it's hyper important for the indigos, the star seeds, those individuals who have always recognized that their mission on the earth is to unveil what humanity is, and then respond to it by building another humanity and another earth that's built on ethics and values. And again, we can't build a new earth and a new humanity without understanding and identifying, and really in our practice, existing in those ethics and values. So that's one of the pivotal.
If you're seeking the divine, my experience of what brings you closer to the divine isn't having more stuff, it's having everything taken away from you. It's the opposite. It's the opposite. And of course we materialize what we need to be of service, and of course creation, which is manifestation out of love. Like, part of our duty here is to give back to the beauty of the physical world and create more beauty, but not from that place of lack, actually from the place of overflow, not from filling the void, from filling yourself and then seeing what materializes. And I just, there's such a mess of ritual and trauma at the moment, and not understand. And actually, the reason that I'm doing this podcast, the reason I'm on the mission I'm on, is because Spirit keeps saying to me that humans have to come back into proper ceremony with the land. And for me, the reason that has to happen is because when you truly work with the land, when you truly pilgrimage with the land, all of these lessons are taught to you. You cannot work with the land and not have not start to develop the understanding of creation and gateways and the true meaning of sacrifice, the true meaning of offering, that all of it you start to understand, because the land teaches you this. Because you come into, you can't work with the land without being with the laws of the land.
The laws of the stargates, which can never be destroyed by anything that has been born out of the theft of ancient Egypt. And that is extremely troublesome for the elite, for example. What is exceptional here, and I just want to speak about this. The mainstream contains a lot of manipulation and a lot of shadow. So you're completely right about your perspective on it, your comment, and that comes from a place of truth. I mean, and in our spiritual community, we often been programmed to be silent, but we have to have these conversations. They're quite hard conversations because they will make people who have addiction to shadow uncomfortable. But we have to have these conversations so that we can go the right way in our spiritual work. It's mega important. And I've been talking about this for 30 years. I mean, the concept of my work hasn't really changed. I'm a seeker of truth. And when we seek truth, we magnetize completely our lives in a completely different way. And we achieve the change that we dream of without any manipulation. When we're here in gateways, and this is something important, we don't have the conversation on contact, for example. Contact fascinates me. But if we are just contemplating contact and we're not doing the work for contact, and that's why land work is important, Stargate work is essential, and benevolence is essential, because then we have a transfer of time which is so far beyond our planet. And that is also a transfer of psychology and a transfer of consciousness, which is what we need. We need non-human experiences. Why? Because this is where our karmic glitch is.
And also because for what we need to do next, we don't have the nervous system. The human ancestral nervous system is programmed for the glitch, the survival mode, the failure. And so we have to borrow the nervous system of our soul star family to be able to achieve it.
This is a kind of interesting thing, because you know that I've built a project here, and I'm interested in the Stargate and how it naturally decompresses the central nervous system, how certain water sources naturally decompress us, how certain food sources will naturally decompress us. I mean, we live in modern world and we are under so much stress and destruction, and it's largely deliberate, by the way. So we have to look at the earth, and we have to look at what's here and the legacies that have been left here as traces of another humanity. And I truly believe that the ancient Egyptians succeeded in creating an interplanetary and complete planetary grid that was designed to stabilize the trauma of the destruction of Atlantis. And it's in these gateways that we have the technology to recalibrate our central nervous system. And those time inserts then are extremely important, because then I'm weaving. And this isn't hypnosis. This is weaving time. This is weaving dimensions. This is magnetizing the presence of the interplanetary, intergalactic alliance, which is benevolent and can only serve us, if we are well within the laws and the jurisdiction of the universe, which is benevolence. And this is why we cannot be entitled spiritually, because we forfeit our right of passage to request help if we're not benevolent. So we have to get into the work that really purifies us, resets us, regenerates us. And this is why I'm here. I mean, it becomes the philosophy of the work that I do with communities, because what we're also consistently building are individuals and communities that can hold down this new consciousness, a new earth that is absolute. I mean, there's no bend on this. It is being birthed, but the commitment to it needs a legacy of spiritual work that isn't mainstream. The mainstream is too first, second, third, fourth, if we're lucky, in dimension. And even when people speak about ascension, their field is largely contaminated with programming. And that's why Stargate work is extremely important. And the protection of Stargates is mega important. And we are significant as humans at this time, with the potential to hold a completely different timeline and a completely different level of consciousness. That's why the elite are so rigorous in destroying humanity, destroying Palestine at this time. And we have to get to that place where we're not even subconsciously signing up to this bullshit. Like, it's done. It's absolute. Yeah, there's no token gesture, love and light and peace and that bullshit, which is so visible in the mainstream. And that's what we have to cure, and that's what we have to solve. And then there are these amazing generations. I mean, I have daughters in their 20s. I want the next generations to be free of intergenerational trauma. I want them to be free spiritually. I want them to be able to engage in their soul, and I want them to be able to build humanity and earth in ways that haven't been materialized before. And that's what the generations, the next generations, have the possibility of doing. However, there are so many disruptions and contaminations. Remember this. Genius and mysticism go hand in hand. It's not Silicon Valley. No, it's not digital architecture. No, we need the soul to solve the world that we exist in. I mean, I'm so passionate about this. It's so important. It's so important that actually we can have this conversation and not be afraid. Don't be afraid of being wrong. Have the conversation about this, because I think spiritual people, really deep down, they really, really know what bullshit is. And what's happening in the mainstream is, and I hear this often, a lot of people don't know where to go for bona fide, honest spiritual work, because the mainstream is saturated by wannabe experts that have no expertise at all. This is the problem, and it's an energetic nightmare. So, for example, energy is something that you should feel.
Mm-hmm.
So when someone walks in a room, you should be able to feel their energy. You should be able to feel their benevolence. These are not ideas. There's not something that we work to. It's something that we must materialize. We must practice.
Mm-hmm.
We must take the opportunity. We must choose it.
Mm-hmm.
And as we become...
live it, not just choose, live it.
Well, when I say choose, I mean, that's why I'm here. I mean, I'm living it.
Yeah,
right?
I know.
Yeah, and I want to live it in my day-to-day life. I want to live it in my exchanges. I want the truth to be something that is paramount. And I want to be able to have conversations with people who maybe don't perceive in the same way. I mean, we have to have those conversations.
I think that if you are, one of the things I think, if you want to know the teacher or the person that is, how do they treat other people? This is something that I find mind-blowing. The amount of times I take a group somewhere in the world, and the people in the hotel, the tour guides say how they comment on how nice my group are and how different they are from other spiritual travel groups. And I'm like, if you are not being nice to people, then your work isn't working. Like, your spiritual practice isn't working because it's meant to be making you a better human being. Like, it's meant to be making you more heart, And it is shocking to me that this is a surprise to people on the front line of tourism, of spiritual tourism.
Well, yeah,
that a group would be nice to them.
Well, this is an important conversation, and it's a kind of important comment. There is spiritual tourism, and it is incredibly difficult to hold one's self in, for example, ancient Egypt. So any kind of power site, if you're not prepared for pilgrimage or esoteric pilgrimage, then you are going to lead, and that teacher will lead from a place of chaos and a place that will unravel the shadow. And that's dangerous. And I mean, it is immensely dangerous in terms of breaching gateways, dissolving protection, leading by the ego, etc., etc. So it is more than just hazardous. I mean, it's a disaster beyond rudeness. And so once someone can't handle being here, and I do a lot of work, and I produce tours for people who need more experience often. So I'll co-host, but in co-hosting, I'm often holding the field that they would normally hold in a far less intensely divine gateway. And it is needed that they're stabilized because, of course, here is truth. Here is divinity, and divinity is absolute, and that is the path. And if it is not a divine path, then the shadow is unveiled. So chaos is something that we can perhaps significantly hide in denser environments, in denser landscapes, in the yoga studio in London, for example. You transfer that teacher who has no legacy training in Egypt, and they transfer and they believe that everything's going to be exactly the same as the yoga studio in London, then that becomes extremely problematic, and many initiations will pop, and that individual will have absolutely zero jurisdiction or control to assist what should be under their caretaking. So I've seen it a lot where individuals in the mainstream come here and they have no idea the magic, the mysticism, the contact, the intelligence that is here. And yes, Egypt has something that is extraordinary and you can't find it anywhere else, but the magic is so potent.
So potent.
It's so potent, and you have to respect it. Yes.
And you have to work, coming here and not asking permission, not like you are going into magical land law and it's alive here. You got to come in the right way here. If you don't come in the right way here, you're not going to have a nice time.
Well, you're going out backwards, basically. And you're going out with the consequences of not preparing. And I mean, that really does untangle people so that they don't return. Of course, they won't return in that experience because, of course, it unveils everything that they are not. It unveils the illusion. And I mean, that as a formula is really significant. If we can exist in a gateway that unveils illusion, then if we initiate in those pathways, then we can unveil the illusion that is animated by so many individuals who are on the side of a far denser elite. So these are very important teachings, philosophies and technologies and restorations that are essential in solving this glitch. I mean, it's a glitch of existence.
I think Egypt's also essential in the sense that it's interesting. As you know, we tried to do this podcast 2 times before we managed to land it. And one of the things that has been making me smile as we've been talking is I realized that only a couple of days ago, my guides were saying that if you can make time, then you can manifest anything that time can hold. It's just that we've lost the ability to make time. And what's been giving me saying about Egypt's holding of time is I'm like, Egypt remembers how to make time and can teach us how to make time, which is why we can make the new earth.
And the other part of it is, I'm a timekeeper. I don't know if you know that.
You do know that.
Well, the ancient Egyptians weren't just interested in making time. However, that was part of the cult of the goddess that has been lost, which I specialize in. There's another component of it. The ancient Egyptians were fully aware of the archives that were laid down by the goddess, preceding all other gods. Now, with those archives honored and respected and exactly followed the instructions, then we not only begin to recognize we can create time, we are keeping time based in the original archives. And when we keep time as described and prescribed in the original archives, then we have all of the protection in place and the gateways animate as they should, which takes us back into a universal marriage of benevolent intelligence across the universe. We keep time. The other part is learning to keep time, learning to protect it, learning that it has a particular jurisdiction in particular gateways. And there are particular stargates that are extremely relevant on the planet. And that's another conversation. I mean, it's blah, blah, blah. And when we understand how to keep time, and I mean, and that's very rigorous, and that is in spiritual work. I mean, okay, let me say this. In spiritual mainstream, can these individuals keep time? No, of course they can't. It's a mess. So how the hell do these people build the new earth when they have very, very limited perception, self-clarity, jurisdiction, responsibility? These are spiritual qualities that must be understood and must be extremely well maintained. The other part of this is when we enter advanced spiritual work and then we advance time, then we create time. And that also allows us to lay down the legacy of the future. And it also allows us to decide when we incarnate, which is also what the ancient Egyptians were doing in their own archives. So, where it went wrong, they knew that it would go wrong. They left the archives of this. However,
this is exactly the same guidance I have that Egypt. My understanding is that magic was put around Egypt to protect the archives for this time.
And genetically and incarnationally, we didn't just build time. We built into place the architecture of the incarnations and the timing, preserved and protected of the incarnation of souls, whose mission it is to create new earth, new humanity, new psychology, new timelines, new realities. So what is significant is the level of destruction on the planet at this time. And this is a genetic destruction. And this is what we must protect. So our spiritual work must be metaphysical to protect memory and bloodlines.
And
it's so critical.
Somebody listening who wants to keep time.
Whoa.
What is the first thing they should do?
To significantly excavate the memory of why you are here. And that will exist often as a dream. It may exist as a memory that you were avidly connected with as a child and avidly connected with in terms of knowing it is your destiny beyond anything conventional or anything that you've been programmed to be. And find the stillness, because the stillness allows memory. And we have to, I promise we have to unplug from the digital energetic architecture that is disrupting time and disrupting our capability to remember. So there's a lot of excavation that can only be done by detoxing. And so these elements are important. Nature is important, of course. I mean, I was doing a course on Monday, the future. And remember, it's not the simulation, the digital simulation that is going to carry the sequence of your memory and your life path. It's living things.
Don't think that intelligence that is not sentient is intelligent. You know, that the sentient is what is intelligent. Turn to that intelligence.
Yeah, I mean, I have a wonderful husky, and his name is Anubis Bowie, and Anubis relates to the dogmen, who are the ultimate mortal gatekeepers of the stargates, particularly in Africa and the Middle East. And these are the legitimate mortal gatekeepers who understand the gateways and the timelines. So I suggest that we keep this very simple. Of course, what I speak about, my philosophy, my discoveries are, I mean, it's extraordinary. I mean, it's mind blowing. That's what keeps me humble. Because I have to then understand it. So I'm constantly striving to understand how it can be transferred and applied in a suitable way for human integration. And that's really important. It's very important that we recognize the life force of living things, and we don't see life force in digital things, and it's is severely disrupting our ability to remember. So there's a real severing of keeping time, and that is extremely disturbing because we lose more people in the collective. So even if you're waking up as a spiritual individual, and you've been awake, I mean, it's very significant that the collective is being heavily monitored and heavily primed to never have memory and to simply be consumers of the algorithm. So this is extreme. I mean, we should be developing mystical work for extreme resistance. It's huge. And so digital technology is not the technology of the soul, and is not the technology that will allow us to remember our eternity. It's very important to be around humans. It's very important to be around animals that actually can hold these benevolent fields, that wish to and seek out to assist us, to serve us. So, for example, when we're benevolent, the elements animate, and that's how these extraordinary temples and tombs and pyramids were constructed. However, our current technology comes nowhere near it because, of course, our current consciousness, it comes nowhere close to what is here. So, for example, I was out on the Nile, and I often write the archives, and then I'll go find where they are, for example, in a temple or in a text. And one of the archives I received was about the immortal ones. The immortals levitated 6 and 20 cubits above the Nile. The mortals ascended in the ceremony and the ritual of the mortal ones. And so levitation and mysticism is the domain of the immortal ones, is the domain of New Earth. But ceremony, where we descend into tunnels, for example, to animate the illusion of mysticism. And that's what we have to get right as individuals who can be part of the jurisdiction of the mainstream, consciously or unconsciously. I mean, we hope that we're in mysticism, but sometimes we have to really blag it, right? So there's a lot of blagging in the mainstream at the minute, and it's, it's dressed to fit. The ceremonies are dressed to fit, but I mean, really, is this really in time, right?
We were laughing at solstice actually because winter solstice, everybody's in a dry robe covered in mud. And I'm always like, this is what goddess looks like. Like that goddess fashion on Instagram is not what you look like when you're in ceremony on the earth. You're often in wellies in a dry robe with mud on your third eye.
Well, well, I often request my initiates. They turn up in civilian clothes, so they're in trainers and gear that's easy to do mystical work in. So they're not bothered about what they're wearing, because
Exactly.
that's not the initiation. And I mean, and the more we subdue staging what mysticism or ascension is, the better it is. So we need to move from parody into reality. This is the problem.
And the reality is probably you're going to be wearing clothes that are comfortable and convenient to sustain the ceremony, not glamorous and look good on Instagram. Like that is the reality. Is like if you are your clothes should be serving the ceremony.
Sure. And I mean, I know I love esoteric pilgrimage, and I love ascetic pilgrimage. So, I mean, I'm the kind of person who will make pilgrimage at noon in August and it's 50. And so you are stripping away any ego limitations or any costume that is staged, right? So
And
the
you're going to
more,
be
yeah.
well,
yeah, you're eliminating all the dysfunction of staging it and faking it, and I mean, that's one of the bravest initiations, to depart the mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
And just be real. And I mean, you asked for advice. It's about being real. It's about having integrity. It's about asking questions, even when you don't know the answer. I mean, we have to ask questions. We have to stop being hypnotized by the person who is influencing or is the influencer, because these people do not categorically impress me, inspire me, or blow me over when I meet their energy. In fact, it is quite the opposite. I have no interest in being around an individual or even a collective of individuals who are in the dysfunction of the ego. I'm not interested in it. So I think people on a very basic level, they need to listen to their instincts. If it's not right, and you don't need to know the reason. If it's not right, it's not right. You listen to it. Right?
I think I love that in the shape of time, at the end of this conversation, we have come back to listening, which is where we started.
Yeah.
I love that, nearly always the answer is listen.
Is very instant. I mean, listening is something that is an art. It's a science. It's a deep practice.
And
so the teaching is the journey with the teaching, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you may follow the instruction of listening, but your listening may be third dimensional. Your listening may be ego focused. It's going to be contaminated. Deep listening requires deep practice.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And only listening is really authentic listening is animated through deep healing work. So we have to do the work.
Mm.
And for sure, 10 digital companies own the algorithms, own your timeline. I think it's time to really question that and really question who owns our timeline, right? And how to not surrender our timeline. This is really important stuff. It's so critical because the manipulation is extremely devious, both technologically and spiritually.
And watch out for rituals that steal your time, because in old magic, the power isn't in the one-off, it's in the repetition.
Yeah.
Algorithms are ritual. Have you know, like algorithms are repetition, they are ritual. And that's where magic, I mean, Tracey, we're going to have to get you back on it. There's so much, I knew there was so much to talk about.
There is. I mean, I've been considering this since childhood. I mean, I came in with these questions. I came in with perception, but what I did was I trained it so that my human error is less, and if my human error materializes a mistake, then the benevolence that works with me can correct the timeline.
And this is
it's
magic.
Huge work. Yeah, it's huge work. I mean, I'm blessed and it's massive responsibility, and some people will understand what I'm speaking about, and of course some people will go, whoa, she's kidding me, but of course it's how I live my life. This is how I live my life. It's every day. I'm not trying. I don't care about social media. I just care about the work.
I think that if you are looking for teachers, look for the ones that live it every day.
Yeah.
Look for the ones that care about the work and give themselves to, the ones that their life is this work.
I think as well, I mean, your teacher, whether it's a teacher who heals or a teacher who perceives, that teacher should deliver both.
Mm-hmm.
And so your caretaking should be extreme in bespoke initiations, not ceremony that is meaningless. Right? Because what you stage and what you costume and what you action is something that needs to be bespoke and not fashion. So this is really, it's really significant. I mean, ceremony and initiation, it carries an energy. And when I transfer, I mean, I'm having a conversation now. This is my like coffee energy. It's like, that's how I am. But if I have to engage, then we're working with completely different timelines and perception and words and intelligence that I allow to work through me. So again, our calibration, you were talking about this earlier, the calibration of our biology. I mean, we need to reset the temple of our own biology so that we can enter the mystical as mortal and immortal creatures. And I mean, the levitation that is possible, it only becomes possible if we animate the elements. And miracles are only possible if we are magnifying gateways and magnifying the elements, and that brings in a real shift of time and timelines. But it's something that has to be trained. It's not something that is going to come from a one all law of attraction command, because that's nonsense.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So your whole field. So as you build your field, you're building architecture. As you build your field, you're building your presence as a human, and you're integrating your personality, your soul, your timelines, your visibility, because you're in ownership of the way that you live your life and the way that you have lived your life, and you're doing the work. And that's legacy, and that's really being alive, because energetically you're present to time, and you're present to your time on the planet, and you're responsible for your time on the planet. And that's the only way we can do this. I mean, psychology has been really understudied.
And present.
Seriously, yeah. Consciousness is seriously understudied. I mean, our model is Freudian, Jungian. I mean, it's not necessarily something that is going to take us into deeper understanding of what consciousness is and what reality is, because of course the symmetry is very important to understand and alchemize, right?
And also to consider that our archetypes are only human is madness. Like we were dreamed by the plants and the animals. Like, to consider that our archetypes are only human is part of the problem with our separation consciousness.
Well, is also part of the problem in terms of the wound and the shadow generating modern psychology, right? Which was actually lifted from here, but what was omitted because of patriarchy. What was omitted is the significant power of the goddess, and what the presence of the goddess does to our consciousness and our psychology. So, it's significant. There's been significant missed details.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're dealing with individuals who have deliberately misplaced the goddess as the very epicenter of understanding who we are, our memory, then those icons of psychology are not on our side. Got it?
Got it.
Freud.
I would love this conversation to continue, but it's going to continue in another episode.
Okay.
I have 2 fast questions for you. The first one is, who should we have on this show next?
Crap. Oh my. I have to consider it in terms of the sequence of your show, because you need someone who's big.
After you, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So you need someone who is really working with the entire structure of humanity, and is really a visionary in terms of what needs to happen next for humanity. You need someone who is a political visionary, oracle, and seer.
You know someone like that?
I will find out.
Thank you.
But that's what you need. I would have someone like Zach Plansky, maybe, because he is a sound, unconventional fit for what is taking place in particularly the United Kingdom's political deconstruction and what is being invited to speak as truth in politics. Try and get him.
I will try and get him.
Because he's attempting to be as truthful as possible. And I think that is so noble. Because the dangers of speaking truth in politics.
Dangerous. It's more dangerous than it is speaking it in spirituality. It is quite dangerous to speak it in spirituality.
But I mean, also to really see that there are profound spiritual beings. I mean, the kind of spiritual work that really bowls me over at the minute are people in politics, are people in journalism where their integrity is so sound. These are our spiritual teachers, not individuals animating fake spiritual ceremonies. And I saw that trend starting to really gather some pace during the pandemic, where people had time to reconsider their lives. And these are ordinary people. I mean, even here, the people who walk through the doors who are ordinary are the most spiritual.
Oh,
They're extraordinary. Yeah. So I would like to see someone on your podcast who is really, really ordinary and really, 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 really incredible and doing incredible things in ordinary ways to indent revolution in ordinary people and to impress revolution in ordinary people. Yeah. So that's one answer. And I'll think about it. I'll send you some ideas.
Thank you so much. And then how can people find you if they want to work with you?
Well, they can knock on my door in Luxor, and I do have a 22-bedroom facility that is built for everything that I've spoken about. And you'll find me on tracyash.com is my website. And yeah. And then you can discover my schools, offerings, revolutions, diverse range of work for individuals and communities. But the common thread is truth. And that's what we need. We need more individuals who are entering a revolution of truth. And once we do that, then we are the tipping of the scales in terms of the old world, and we start to really heavily dismantle it. And it's time. It's time. Yeah. Great conversation with you. And
I'm so glad you came on the show. I've loved this conversation and just so much awe for the work you're doing. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. There's very little time to bask in the glory of it, because every hour is like 100 years. Yeah. So it's the reality that we exist in at this time. We just need to know that it's going to be okay, and it is going to be okay. But we have to make that stand. We have to make the stand, and we have to stand with others who are also making that stand.
Agreed.
Yeah. So thank you for inviting me, because I can be a bit of a rebellion, and energetically I'm quite
We
strong.
need rebellion. We need what the world needs right now is angry, horny, rebellious witches. That is what it needs.
Yeah, I'm not angry, but I'm very rebellious and very unconventional and very unusual, and I love unusual in everyone. So yeah, we need to remind people that it's still possible to be genius. We need more Bowies, we need more ethical human beings on the planet who are just in recognition.
And
that
in
there is. Yeah, genius. And in genius is spirituality, and we can't be spiritual unless we're also innovators and genius, and really trusting that we can transcend this density that is so insignificant, and control is so insignificant once you depart the density. I mean, it's so easy to shift perspective, but you have to understand how you shift it, and how you maintain that shift. So it's not like, oh my God, I had that spiritual experience and I'm definitely it. And it's like an experience that you had 20 years ago and you're still the same person. That is not spiritual evolution. Right?
No,
And so,
I'm like,
yeah.
if you like your life, don't go on a spiritual journey, because you're not gonna have the same life.
Well, yeah. I mean, you are definitely going to have to excavate and surrender so many different parts of yourself that were fantasy. It's inevitable. But then the freedom of that is a very spiritual and content and peaceful life. And even if you
Beautiful.
don't commit to anything in terms of an aggressive career or any of those things, but you're just that person who is just immensely decent, the quality of that human in the world is just mind-blowing. I mean, it's just extraordinary, right?
It really
So we
is.
don't, we need to be ambitious, but we need to let go of it, and we need to not be ever colonial ambitious. I mean, that is just savage.
I hope you come on to the show and talk about being colonial ambitious. I think that will be a great starting point. Tracey, I have loved this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Lots of love.
Time. And may the land be with you all.
If today's episode touched your heart and you want to come into greater relationship with Mother Earth, visit landtantra.com and get involved. Your truth is part of this conversation, and we would love you to reach out on socials and let us know how it landed. And if it really inspired you, we hope you share it with others. Let's add more wow to our world.